Absolutely. Should be good
Lovely
fun.
stuff. So, England's oldest club, Preston North End, the only one with that suffix after their name
Mm,
as well. I think most people's idea on Preston is they're very well liked, aren't they?
yeah.
Because they've done basically what Ipswich want to do. Where was the
Yeah.
finish last year? Just outside the playoffs?
Just outside the playoffs, I think were they seventh, eighth, ninth. It was in. I haven't got the table up in front of me, but they were in that cluster. I call them the progressives. That group of teams. You'd
I
include
like it.
Bristol City, Millwall, Sheffield United, Brentford. Teams with not a lot of money, but with a plan. And they all came up from League One, found their feet in the Championship, and are now thinking, okay, what's next? And you would definitely put Preston in with that group. And it's funny when you look at their transfer business, it's all contract extensions right the way through. Paul Gallagher, Sean Maguire, the striker, Tom Clark, defender, Darnell Fisher, defender, Alan Brown, the midfielder. Upon Hunte, Greg Cunningham, the fullback who's gone to Cardiff City, and the other player who was on his way out anyway was veteran John Welch, the holding midfielder. He was a bit of a what the Italians would call an incontrista, somebody who was an out and out tackler whose job was to break up
Gattuso.
play. A Gattuso, exactly that. An English Gattuso. He's gone. But tellingly, what have they done? They've brought in Andrew Hughes, a really decent fullback from Peterborough, who they like, and they've also brought in a guy called Ryan Ledson from Oxford, and they were saying about both of them that they are perfect fits. They're saying Hughes, he's physically good, defensively solid, and looks to have a bit about him going forward. Whereas Ledson, he proper puts himself about a basic and more athletic John Welch. So you can see what Alex Neil's doing. Consolidation, keep what you've got, just incrementally just move it forward. If you lose a few, because we're going to sell some, we're not the biggest team in the league, we've already got, there's that sense of continuity and that sense of progress. So they can't wait for the coming season. They're very, very optimistic. A lot of positivity on their message boards, and definitely looking at a playoff fight. And if you look at Alex Neil's type of football, it's kind of very it's kind of I sometimes call it Braveheart football. It's in your face. It's feisty. It's
Lots of
combative.
yellow cards.
Yeah, absolutely. That was their criticism last year. They had such a poor disciplinary record, and they were also worried that their squad picked up a lot of small injuries because of the fact that they were just hammering into players left, right, and centre. There was this sense that they didn't actually have. They didn't actually have the manpower because they'd no more bodies to kind of throw into the battle, literally. So, but they love the play. They love the style of play. It's a well-defined model. All these teams that we mentioned, Bristol City, Millwall, Sheffield United, they all have slightly different styles of play, but they have a style of play and they all stick to it. And because they're doing that, you've a settled team. It progresses forward, and you can see, from an Ipswich point of view, my guess is Evans has looked at that. Marcus Evans has looked at that and decided that's our way forward.
Well, because if that in any way works, you
Yeah.
then can sell on those players for
Hmm.
silly money to the rich
Yeah.
boys. Three
Yeah.
quick topics for you, Harry. First one was just on what's your view on Alex Neil? Because when I spoke to Jack Reeve from Talk Norwich City, he said that he thought that Norwich kind of swallowed him up and spat him out, but that this is a good manager who's going to do well. Is
Yeah.
is is that Jordan Hugill money? Is that just going to be running costs and sitting on it? And Ben Pearson, I think he's a really good player. Is he gonna become the saleable asset?
That's what they would hope. Two questions. I totally agree with Jack on Alex Neil. What he did was, we'll obviously talk about Norwich another time, but he galvanised that team. He's brilliant on the training ground. He's that type of McLaren. He's a brilliant coach, but he's also proving himself to be a good manager. And it was a hell of a baptism of fire for him. But the way he galvanised that Norwich team after they actually were knocked out of the cup by Preston, if you remember, I think it was Neil Adam was sacked, and then in he came. And the way he just absolutely galvanised that team, he has that in him. But it was a hell of a leap from that then into the Premier League. But he is a very good manager. Pearson, yes, you've got Pearson and Brown in midfield playing off Harrop. seems to
Very
have been
strong, very strong.
yeah, it's a strong midfield. Again, a bit like Sheffield United we were talking earlier. The midfield isn't something, it's all these unseen work you see, when you've got a decent three-man midfield. Sean Maguire up front they like, they're very happy with him. And you Clark and Huntington. Huntington again is your kind of steel girder in the middle of the back four. And again another one of these who lummock up for set pieces. And they're very happy. One small Ipswich thing, they've brought Michael Crowe in, and I have to say I was sorry to see Michael go, because I've seen him in a good few under 21 games, etc. And I felt he was a decent keeper. And at the moment he's still number 3 in the pecking order there, because they've got 2 ahead of him. But I'm going to keep an eye on him, because I really rate him, and I was just sorry that we lost him, really.
And
but obviously,
you think they'll continue sitting on the Hugo money to give him just a bit of a buffer?
They're not the type of team that will go big on it. It's not in that model where you go out and you buy a big titolare, as the Italians would call them, a big name, a focal point, because it destabilizes the dressing room. It's a bit, it's more. I could see them spending it on 3 very good prospects, but they're not going to load up the squad with players that they don't need. It's all very pragmatic and sensible and balanced. It really is. You've got to give it to them. You really do. And you can see them. All being well, with allowing for injuries, allowing for the usual caveats, they're set up for a decent season, and they really can't wait. So I'm just looking, just looking at what the notes I have here, a quick passing game being sharpened up in pre-season. They belted their first 3 games, 7-0 over Bamber Bridge, 6-1 over Fylde, 5-0 over Cove Ramblers, but then a 2-2 draw with West Ham and 3-2 defeat to Burnley. And that was a full-strength Burnley team, because they were involved in the Europa League against Aberdeen. Yeah. So, they've been, they can more than hold their own. So, yeah, I'm intrigued. It's also interesting because moving on to Bolton.